What is consciousness? That's a pretty big question, isn't it? If we start looking around and we start listening to what's going on in the world, we start asking, really, what is consciousness? Why is what's going on going on? Ferguson. What's happening in Ferguson? What consciousness is causing that? What consciousness is going on in Washington, D.C.? What consciousness is going on in Wall Street? What consciousness is going around in Africa right now with the Ebola virus and AIDS running rampant? What consciousness is going on in the Ukraine and Russia? And we start saying, if consciousness is all there is, well, damn. Damn, look at what consciousness is creating. Before I want to go and talk about what consciousness is creating, I want to start to go in and give you my best on what I know consciousness to be. I can tell you this, that the definition of quantum physics is that consciousness is the ground of all being. So did you hear what I was saying there? The ground of all being, that everything that is a result of consciousness. Okay? You're hearing that? So nothing can exist without consciousness focusing on it. Now, there's not God consciousness that's causing all this. Keep in mind that we're all God in expression. We're all individualizations of it. So I have a Lee consciousness, and however aware I am of the power that I am and what I'm putting into the universe, I will create an experience. Okay? Then there's a consciousness, if you come into my home, you'll have the blending of the Lee consciousness, the Gene consciousness, the Stephen consciousness, my dog Bailey's consciousness, and my parrot Toby's consciousness. And you'll come in and you will feel a different energy than if you were just with Lee or you were just with Gene. Why? Because there's a collective consciousness. Does that make sense? So there's an energy being formed by that, whatever it is. Now you come into a place in a building like this, and you're in this room with like-minded people. There's a consciousness in this room. And the consciousness in this room, do you feel that it's different than last week? How many people were here last week? Not to embarrass anyone, but do you feel it's different this week than last week? Yes. Because there's different people here today than there were last week. And the people who are here are in a different state. And so consciousness of a group is forever shifting and shaping and being different. Okay? Now I'm going to date myself a little bit, because I'm going to go back into 1964 and 1967. And in 1964 and 67 is when we had the riots going on in Watts, and we had the riots going on in Detroit. And I lived in Dearborn right outside Detroit, so I was very familiar with what was happening. And there was a consciousness then that was saying, burn this. We can't tolerate what's going on, the inequalities, the racism. And it was extreme militantism because it had been suppressed so long. So the other day, I'm in the gym doing my elliptical. I've got no fear in what comes on. I'm listening to Pandora because I love Pandora because I can get the genres I want. And I was feeling a little 60s, 70s genre, so I was kicking it with that. And Jefferson Airplane comes on, and they start doing Volunteers of America. And that's a song about what it was like to be alive in the late 60s and 70s. It was about this movement of new thought among the younger people where we were rebelling against the man. We were rebelling against the rules, and we're saying there's a better way to do it. And the song goes, and we sold out. And we did. I did. I sold out from the time I got children. And that's not a thing against children, but I couldn't form a different consciousness of what it was like to be a parent than what I had seen in society, what I'd seen around me. So I lost the ideal Lee and I became the conservative Lee. I stopped imagining and I started confining myself into a box. And all these magnificent ideas that were there. In 1969, I went to Dearborn High School. Dearborn High School is a city on the border of Detroit. It's the home of Ford. Henry Ford was there. It was the home of that. Now, Dearborn, the city I lived in, at the time I lived there was all white. And it was white for years, and the mayor was Orville Hubbard. And Orville Hubbard ran on the platform that as long as I'm mayor, there will never be a black living in Dearborn. That's the community I was raised in. In 1969, as a senior, I started an integration club in Dearborn High School, and I went and became an exchange student and was with a family in the bowels of Detroit. And I don't know if you've ever lived in the bowels of Detroit, but it is not a pretty place. And when I went there, I was accepted. I was accepted just like anyone else. Then I brought a young man into my home from the bowels of Detroit, and I brought him to school with me for a week. And let me tell you, I took a lot of abuse. But the thought that went through my mind was this: I'm willing to do that if every man and woman on this planet can be treated the same. Because here's the thing about consciousness. It exists in all of us. It is the golden thread of God. Did you notice I used the G word? I used the God word, but it's not the man in the sky. It's all that exists. And that consciousness exists in every human being. So, now we come to 2014, and we've got Ferguson, Texas happening. Ferguson, Missouri happening. How is consciousness working there? Do you see that consciousness will always do things to raise its level of awareness? So what's happening in Ferguson is to awaken St. Louis. It's to awaken Missouri. It's to awaken the United States. It's to awaken the world that this type of philosophy of segregation or putting down or causing not to see people as equal is all around us still. We're fooling ourselves to think that it doesn't exist. It does exist. And then we got to see what happened. We went against it in a military fashion, and we brought out the SWAT team that looked like they came from Iraq. They were more protected than the soldiers that fought World War II. And you saw the news media playing on that and building an energy around it, and there was a huge revolt in this country. Facebook, Twitter, everything started saying, no, we are not putting up with all of this military. And what happened? The governor got involved. The president got involved. Regardless of what you think about these people, they got involved, and all of a sudden now the SWAT military, they're taken out and the highway patrol is in. And did you notice that shift of consciousness caused a whole different response? Now the response was, we didn't go in there with just love, because couldn't go in with just love. But we toned it way down. We walked the captain or whoever it was that was in charge of that from the highway patrol, he walked with them. Is there any better way to know that people care about you than when you walk with them? You're a part of them. He was demonstrating oneness. You see, consciousness is always seeking to expand its awareness within us. Did you hear that? That's really good. Consciousness will do everything until we become a little bit more aware. So if we're having a problem with health, it's about consciousness saying, wake up. There can be no disease when we're fully aligned in the oneness of all that is. When we're aligned with this divine beingness and we're at peace with it and we understand who we are, there is no disease. Disease comes from our idea that there's separation. All relationship problems are the fact that we see people as separate and we're comparing them, we're judging them, so we're not seeing them as having the common thread of oneness, and we're not doing what Jesus said to do, and is love them. Do not judge them, accept them as they are. Realize that their path is the perfect path for them. If we are having problems in our career, what does that mean? It means that we are not expressing that which is in us that is seeking to come forth, and the universe is going to say, you know what, it's going to be pretty damn miserable here until you get the message and you find that which is about expressing your greatest joy. That's why I got fired in 2004. Can I be more clear? And if I wasn't fired in 2004, I wouldn't be standing here today. Because that was my crossing point. That was the point that had to happen for me to go to ministerial school. And why was that important? Because that was my heart's calling. Ever since I was a little boy, I thought it was a priest I wanted to be. But that didn't prove to be it. I wanted to be a teacher. I remember in 6th grade, listening to Father Robert Scanlon, a young priest just out of the seminary, and he came and he spoke. And he came, Charles, I'm moving. And he came and he got behind the podium. You know, in the Catholic Church, they have the podiums. So I'm going to bring it up. And he got behind the podium, and it's much bigger than this. It's wood, it's a monster. God stands behind the podium. And he got there and he just leaned in like this. And he just talked. Just like he talked to his mother or his father. And it was in that moment, that's when I knew what my calling was. And I knew it was my calling because I felt it. I felt it at the core of my being. My hair and my arms stood up. I said, I was meant to do that, and I can do it in my unique way. So remember at the opening of service when I talked about how this young man described me, that I was a bit of this, a bit of that. I was like a Deepak. I was like a Ken Wilber. I had all of these things. What I've come to understand is that all the teachers that I've studied have become the consciousness of truth expressing uniquely through me. And that's the same thing that every teacher does. This is not special to me. I'm not special. I'm just Lee. And in my world, Lee is special. But I want you to know that in your world, you should be special. You should have the consciousness. You should have the awareness that in your life, you are the perfect emanation of all that is. And what is it within you calling forth that's desiring to be expressed? When you watched Steve and the band play earlier, did you see them expressing their gift? They didn't know anything other than the music. I can't imagine. How do you play the electric guitar and know all these single things that they do? Well, see, I can't even do it in voice. But when I was a kid, I did the air guitar. Pete Townsend was my idol. I love Pete when he's just, anyway, I'm off. I've never left the idea of being a hippie. And I want you to know I'm very proud of that. Because being a hippie meant something then. It meant that you had the open mind, you were willing to look at things anew. You were willing to not accept what is, and by not accepting what is, you were there expanding your version of consciousness. Because we all have consciousness in us, right? The question is, how aware are we that it is there? I remember in 1999 being at Unity on Forest Lane. And I remember Deepak Chopra was there, the first time I ever saw Deepak Chopra. And I was sitting in the audience, and Deepak took us through a guided meditation. And it was the first time I had an out-of-body experience. And Deepak would have been way up there in the front, and I literally saw my spirit go up into the farthest corner. And then I watched myself and saw everything happening at the same time. And I went, whoa, that's cool. I took a good whiff. No marijuana being smoked in here. And I knew that it was possible to get into the state that I've heard people talk about being in a state of oneness, about being in a state of connectivity. And so I really got that demonstration a year ago when I was in India. And we were going through the floods of the Uttarkashi region, and we were literally trapped there. And I literally came out of my body and became this observer of the situation while I was still in my body. And in that state of consciousness, all fear disappeared. Because you see, in the consciousness of being human, there's tremendous fear. But when we expand that consciousness, realize that the consciousness that we are is infinite and it's connected to all that is, fear disappears. Because when you're connected to all that is, into that consciousness, you know that death does not exist. It is simply the shedding of the human body, but the soul, that individual point of consciousness that you are of the divine, that is unique, whole, and perfect, continually evolves, expands, and is forever living. It has always been living. Can you ever remember a time when you were not? No, because you've always been. Here's the secret. You always will be. If you always will be, is there anything to ever fear? You see, the awareness of consciousness, the awareness of who we are, the awareness of our truth takes fear and obliterates it. But keep in mind, we are human. So to think that fear will disappear forever is wrong, because we are going to always be having contrast. And in that, we must be aware. Contrast is going to come at us so that we can rise in our awareness, right? Last week when I talked about the fact that I was going to be put to hell if I didn't accept, that was a shift from my consciousness to understand, do I believe what I say? And can I act in love in that moment while being attacked? And the answer is yes. Love always wins, because love is always our connection to the divine. That's a hard one to grasp in this world. But if we can make a step, and then a little step, and then another little step, in 1 year we'll have taken a step this big. That puts our lives in a whole new direction. Then we take another step. But you see, whenever we're taking another step, we're building off a bigger base. And when we're building off a bigger base, we start to have a whole new and different experience. And keep in mind that when you have whole new and different experiences and we become aware and we connect, we're going to get more challenges. And the challenges may be bigger. But they're not going to be any bigger than anything we can't deal with, because we've built our awareness of who we are. And you see, consciousness expands when we slow down our ego. And we do that, number one, in meditation. Number two, in directing the law, that aspect of God that creates that's within each of us. We do that through prayer. We do that through visualization. We do that through affirmations. We do that through gratitude. We do that through visioning. We do that through forgiveness, through all of these mental exercises. Those are all forms of prayer, directing the power within us to create a mental atmosphere, and that mental atmosphere becomes that which is in us that attracts unto us. So we quiet the mind in meditation. We still it of all the noise, of all the thoughts that are not really serving us anymore. Because the thoughts that we have right now keep us locked in to the same experience over and over again. You know, go watch the movie Groundhog Day. I mean, if you want a movie about what your consciousness does, go watch that movie and think about it from the standpoint as he changed, as Bill Murray changed his mental equivalent of what could happen. Remember, every time he went back, he changed an aspect, and he started having a whole new experience, a whole new experience, a whole new experience. That's what we can do every moment of every day in our life. That's the power that we have. That movie was based on spiritual truth disguised as a comedy. Study Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey is a New Thought spiritual teacher. Go watch his videos on consciousness, on spirituality, on YouTube, and you will see he is saying the exact same things I'm saying right now. He got this at a young age, and he focused all of his attention on becoming the world's greatest comedian, making people laugh. That's what gave him joy, because he saw in his parents who were miserable, they were in extreme pain, that comedy, by him being a goof, he brought them out of that pain for moments at a time. And he says, this is what I want to do with my life. He understood as a child that by making people laugh, we relieve the suffering. Now, we do know there's a difference between pain and suffering, do we not? Let me make that very clear. Pain is if I were to cut myself and my body would respond. Pain would be if I fell on that chair and hit my head. That would be pain. Suffering is the emotion that we create through our thoughts about someone saying something about us or something not happening to us. So suffering, you're going to love this, is a choice. Suffering is a choice. When my mother died, I got to choose this. How long do I want to suffer? Or how long do I want to see the truth about my mom? And the truth about my mom is she's eternal, immortal, and continually forever and ever expanding. You see, she just shed her body. And I had to embrace that. And there's a natural time in human form to grieve, to adjust, to come into that. I still have moments when I miss her physical presence, but most of the time, I know she's everywhere. She's right with me right now. So think about this. All of the relationships you've had or things in your relationship up to now, the beauty of that is it's giving you a greater awareness of what it is you want next. What do you want to experience next in your relationship with your parents, or next with your relationship with your partner, or next with your relationship with a family member, or next with a relationship with a child or a grandchild? What do you want to experience next in business? Everything that has happened. Someone was saying to me the other day, they were struggling with their career, and they were saying, man, it just sucks being in the corporate world. And I said, okay, it sucks, so what sucked? Tell me what sucked. And I let him speak what sucked. And I says, now from what you said, what is it you want that wouldn't suck? Oh, hadn't thought of looking at it that way. Well, this is what I would want, this is what I would want, this is what I would want. Okay, so all this over here gave you the clarity to know what you want. Now start finding that job. Start finding that career. How can you express that? Is it with a company? Is it being an entrepreneur? Is it being in a limited partnership? What does it look like for you? You see, everything brings us to a point of decision. Do you hear that? Everything brings us to a point of decision where the awareness of our consciousness makes the next choice. If we are unaware, we will make a choice out of habit. When we're aware, we'll make a choice out of a directed idea. You see, there is no idea. This idea of positive thinking is nonsense. What's positive and what's negative? To one person it's positive, to another person it's negative. But directed thinking means it's a thought chosen moving toward a specific result. That is the power. It's not the power of positive thinking, it's the power of directed thinking. And in directed thinking, the conscious person knows that thoughts spoken enough creates a mental atmosphere. And when that mental atmosphere is reached, we have the experience. In fact, we have the experience before we have the physical effect of it, because it's done in our imagination and our mind. And has anyone ever been in their imagination and experienced anything real? Ooh, I have. Let me tell you. When I was 16, 17, I was as naive as hell, but I had a vivid imagination. Then I had to live a lot of years before I could experience it in real life. But in my mind, it was there. And when my mind is there and I keep it focused there, the physical or the expression in human form must become real. It must, it's law. It is done unto us as we believe. Those words alone say it all. Consciousness of that tells us everything. When God, and I said this last week, when God said from the burning bush, I am that I am, just put I am that, comma, I am. So what God was saying, or in that analogy that was given in that book, in the Bible, was saying, anything you put I am to with belief and conviction, you become. Did you hear that? Everything you put after I am young and virile. Let me say this a different way. I approach life with youth and virility. That's more believable to me. You hear that? Do you hear that? Because if I say I'm young and virile, I'm going to look in the mirror and I'm not going to see a 17-year-old. You see that? So I would be, as I look at it, I will be lying to myself. So I couldn't believe it, right? I'm talking about you have to believe it. But if I'm acting as a young and virile man, I can believe that. So I'm eternally young with the wisdom of a 63-year-old man. I buy that. I am playful like I was at 17 and yet spiritually mature to know what not to do. Because you can get in trouble. You're following. You see how you're building a belief? It's about how do you make those words believable? Because all we're ever trying to do in consciousness is get to the next step. You see, life is a journey, right? It's one step in front of the other. So we may not be able to make the journey 100 steps away, but we can take that first step toward it. And it's in the conscious awareness that as we're moving toward that thing, we become that thing. And when we embrace it and become it, the experience must be there. There is existence, and then there's the awareness of existence. Do you see the difference? Most people are only aware of existence, but they're not aware of their awareness of that existence. That they are the divine and there is a cause within that can shift and shape. It is so powerful to understand that. You see, our mental awareness creates a frequency, and that frequency is an energetic. Everything in this world is energy. And where we tune our frequency through our thoughts, we put out an energetic and attracts to us that which gives us our experience. It attracts the people. It attracts everything. So probably the easiest way to do this is think about yourself as a radio. This week, just go around thinking about yourself as a radio and saying, okay, what channel am I tuned into? Am I tuned into love and joy? Well, why is that person bitching at me? Then you ask the question, okay, you asked a great question there. Am I tuned into love and joy? Why is that person bitching at me? Am I being loving and joyful when I'm with that person? That's a great question. Because what will happen is if you are being loving and joyful, they will either be responding in a loving and joyful way, or they won't even be with you. You'll be out with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, or you'll be doing something else. You won't even be with them because you're not vibrationally matching. You can't be in a situation unless you're a vibrational match. You ever been to a party and someone walks up to you and you go, whoa, there's an energy, and you move the other direction? I do. Why? Because I understand that my energy attracts to me. And if my energy is pushing something away, I'm going in the other direction because it's not going to be fun. Test it. Go find someone this week that somehow has your button. You know who they are, don't you? And if they're not physically present in Dallas, call them. Pick up the phone and say, hey, it's me. And watch what happens inside. See, it's simple to understand, but it takes real commitment. We must become a spiritual warrior. And when we become a spiritual warrior, we have that commitment. That was one of the great things about Dan Millman in his book. When he wrote that book about the way of the peaceful warrior, it was talking about that. It was about seeing it differently. So I'm going to invite you this week to see life through the eyes of love and joy and abundance and health. love, joy, abundance, and health. And in that, see what frequency draws back to you. And then ask the question, am I a match? I promise you, you will notice things differently than you ever have before. I want to thank you for joining us today. I am so grateful that you took your time to watch or listen to this message. If you found this message beneficial, I would ask you to go to our website. Once there, click on the Contribute button and experience the joy of conscious and purposeful giving. It is through your gifts that we are able to bring this message to the world. I would also ask you to please share this message with anyone you feel might benefit. Again, I want to thank you for joining me and the Agape community as together we bring joy to life.